What's up, people? This is your boy CtRacerX. Today is Sunday, and Sunday is a fun day all the time. Today, I'm getting a new toy.
Counting double-digit thousands.
No, I'm kidding. That's my boy Shalvin's car. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be swapping the intake manifold. So get your tools, get your gloves, and let's get started. Alright, so what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be removing this entire intake manifold here, as well as the boots, the throttle bodies, and the actual intake cowl itself. Alright, so obviously this is a tutorial, as you know, so you're going to have to pop the hood in order to get to the intake manifold. The first step is to go ahead and remove the mass airflow sensor. In order to do that, there's a plug. The plug sits on the mass airflow sensor like this. There happens to be a red clip. So you push the red button down, okay? Then you're able to push in the clip and remove it like so. Step number 2, we're going to go ahead and remove the oil return, which comes out of the PCV valve number 2 over here from the air intake box. You're just going to go ahead and slide that away, just like so. See? All right, step number 3, we're going to go ahead and remove the plastic tabs off the air intake snout. You just go ahead and get those a counterclockwise turn. You know, there's 2 of them here. Just go ahead and remove those guys out of the air intake box snout. And once they're all the way out, then you'll be able to remove this air intake box itself. Now I know what you're thinking. You got those little tabs removed, so now you should just be able to pull the air intake box out. No way. First, what you have to do is release these worm drive clamps, okay? Now, you can technically just release the back ones and everything will slide off. I don't like issues, so I'm going to remove both of these. It makes life a little bit easier. All right, if you've undone the worm clamps, it's now time to go ahead and pull your air intake box out. So go ahead and lift up on the back of it and pull straight back. All right, the next step is to go ahead and remove the clips off the bottom of the throttle body. So you're going to have to push the clips in and slide the throttle body clip off the bottom of the throttle body right here, okay? If they're a little bit tough, that's okay. Just work them a little bit up and down. They'll slide out. Just a side note, you've taken your throttle bodies off of your old intake manifold. Ensure that the throttle bodies go in the exact same position on your new manifold. So there's a couple of things you can do. You can either lightly score on the top of the throttle body, left and right, or when you take them off one at a time, put them in the same position as they were when they came off of the car. I don't know that you would necessarily have a problem, but if Dick Winkles tells you to do it this way, you just freaking do it that way. All right, the next step is to go ahead and remove the manifold absolute pressure sensor. There's a little red clip here. You're just going to go push the clip down, and then you have to push the manifold pressure sensor in underneath. So I'm going to use a set of my side dikes here and just get up underneath it like so. Perfect. The next step is to remove the brake booster line from the side of the intake manifold. Just get a set of side dikes. I like saying that. And then sliding, you're going to go ahead and slide this rubber tube off the intake manifold. Don't mess with this. This is your fuel line. You don't need to remove it. All right, so you're probably thinking to yourself, like, why in the world were we changing the intake manifold? That's because we're swapping to a Gen 5 intake manifold. In order to put the Gen 5 intake manifold on the car, what you need are a set of compression limiters by Doug Shelby Engineering. These are really well designed. They actually have the slant to them so that they'll allow your Gen 5 intake manifold to snugly fit on your Gen 4 motor. So make sure you have these before you start this job. And also make sure you have that. Because without the intake manifold, well, there's really no point. The next step is to go ahead and remove the intake manifold from the car. So what you're going to do is, using a 10mm socket, just go ahead and by hand, with a ratchet, remove all 20 bolts from the intake manifold, okay? Try to refrain from using impact wrenches or something like that. Again, this is aluminum. If you use an impact wrench, you can damage the threads, and it is all bad if you damage the threads on this thing. All right, you've taken all the bolts out of the intake manifold. Now it's time to take the intake manifold off the car. However, first what you want to do is go ahead and remove the clips from here and here in order to release the right-hand side PCV valve. In order to do that, there's these little black zip ties. You're going to have to clip them and take them off. And the next thing you want to do is go ahead and remove the lower pressure equalizers, okay? As you can see, we use a set of side dikes. Go ahead and wiggle it back and forth and then slide them down. Now the intake manifold is free. And Yahtzee. At this point, you're going to go ahead and make sure you clean each one of the surfaces or mating surfaces of your intake manifold. Make sure they're nice and shiny. Also make sure that there's no debris or anything that has fallen inside the motor because that could potentially make your life miserable. It's at this point also you'll notice that you have a lot of oil, like right here, sort of pooling up around the intake manifold. And this is a sign that using a catch can will be probably beneficial to you so that you're not taking in so much oil. Alrighty, so you got your stock intake manifold removed. You've made sure to hook up all your vacuum lines. You've got your new intake manifold sitting on the motor. Now it's time to just make sure that you're aware that there's a difference in things. This right here is the stock bolt. As you can see, the stock bolt is shorter than the new bolt, okay? It is my recommendation to keep your stock bolts because if you ever want to go back to your stock intake manifold, you're going to need to use the shorter bolt. In this case, we're going to the Gen 5 intake manifold. The Gen 5 intake manifold needs a longer bolt, as you can see the difference there. All right, now we're going to go ahead and put in the intake manifold. There's a certain torque pattern in order to make sure this intake manifold sits straight. So once you've done the torque pattern, now it doesn't matter when you go in and tighten them down. Just make sure you get 1/4 turn in for each one of those bolts, okay? Again, try to do this with the motor cold as opposed to warm. You don't want your threads to strip. After doing this for the first time, at about 500 miles, you probably need to go back in and re-torque everything down. That's okay. Again, it doesn't matter the pattern once you've done the initial torque sequence, okay? All right, the next step is to put in the manifold absolute pressure sensor. That's pretty easy, as you said. You go ahead and put the bolt in here, push this bolt in, push the clip up, push in the red clip, and you're good to go there. The next step is to go ahead and put in your brake master cylinder line, a vacuum line, excuse me, to the back of your intake manifold. Let's go ahead and slide that into place like so. And if you are smart, you'll go ahead and get rid of that hideous clamp thing that they have and add yourself on here a worm drive clamp. Trust me, you'll be happier at the end. There you go. Perfect. Okay, now it's time to put in the stock airbox and intake tubes. All right, first what you're going to go ahead and do, line this guy up, reconnect the stock PCV valve fitting here, slide your boots on, then add your mount. Looks good there. Nice airflow sensor clips. Okay, make sure everything's aligned. Two little clips in here. I'm gonna add these guys in. This is where you can be OCD about how they look, so just make sure everything looks lined up and straight. Nothing looks worse than a Viper's intake manifold crooked. So just line it up. Turn in the thumb screws. There you go. And once these are tightened up, then you tighten up your worm clamps here and fire up the car. Okay, people, so that's how you change out the intake manifold on your 2008 through 2010 Dodge Viper. This is consequently the same way you would take the intake manifold off on a 2013 through 2017 model as well. However, they're not going to be doing that for the purposes of swapping to a new intake manifold unless you blew it up. This is the same process you would use to change the intake manifold gaskets as well as the throttle body gaskets. So this video serves multiple purposes. It is normal to expect to torque down the bolts at about 500 miles. That's normal. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I need to retorque these down. The other thing is do not use thread locker. You do not need to use thread locker. If you use thread locker, you likely will damage the threads in the heads, and nobody wants that. Number two, you also might want to consider a catch can, as the amount of oil that goes into the intake and behind the throttle bodies is rather significant. Getting a catch can will release that oil, so you're not having to deal with that anymore. The other issue is that you can also get away with using a catch can, not just on the PCV valve on the right-hand side of the block, but the PCV valve on the left. Good luck with your installation, and I'll catch you real soon.
Double-digit thousands.